Russian President Vladimir Putin praises China's plan for peace in Ukraine, but Kyiv says it falls short of its demands.
European Council President Charles Michel tells Euronews that the EU must engage with China despite their differences.
As protests continue across France, President Macron is due to give a live TV interview about the social unrest over his government's pension reform.
Rail services in Greece restarted for the first time since a tragic head-on train collision, which left 57 people dead 3 weeks ago.
Uganda passes a new bill that could mean people who identify as LGBTQ+ will face up to life in prison or even the death penalty.
1 in 4 people around the world can't access clean drinking water, something the UN wishes to address as it marks World Water Day. Beijing's 12-point peace plan to end the war in Ukraine has been described as falling short on details by Ukraine and its allies. The plan, a topic of discussion between Presidents Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin at their summit in Moscow, doesn't require Russia to withdraw its troops, a basic requisite made by Kyiv. In Washington, the White House response was clear.
So now if China wants to play a constructive role here in this conflict, then they ought to press Russia to pull its troops out of Ukraine and Ukrainian sovereign territory. They should urge President Putin to cease bombing cities, hospitals, and schools, to stop the war crimes and the atrocities, and end the war today. It could happen right now.
The state visit by Xi to Moscow coincided with Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's surprise visit to Kyiv, making him the first leader of Japan to visit a country in conflict since World War II. During their press briefing, President Volodymyr Zelensky said he's invited China for talks on Ukraine.
Китаю ми і публічно, і дипломатичними каналами передали нашу формулу миру і запрошення брати участь в цій формулі. Запрошуємо на діалог, очікуємо відповідь.
China has sought to portray itself as a neutral party in the Ukraine conflict, but so far there is no indication of an equivalent trip to Kyiv by President Xi Jinping.
For the President of the European Council, it's important that China doesn't support Russia with military equipment, but he still believes that Europe needs to keep the channels of communication open with Beijing. In an exclusive interview with Euronews ahead of the European summit, Charles Michel told Euronews that the Chinese peace plan is not the best solution.
I had this in-depth debate with President Xi. I am not naive. I know that there are close ties between China and Russia, but on the other hand, I think that in those circumstances it is very clear that we need to engage with China, not because we agree on everything with China, on the contrary, but because we need to defend our interests and to defend our principles.
So are you convinced by the peace plan that Beijing presented?
This peace plan is not what we believe in, because we believe in the peace formula proposed by President Zelensky, which is based on the UN Charter, the international law, and the multilateral approach.
We also spoke with the European Council President about the economy and how to deal with the consequences of the war in Ukraine. Watch the whole exclusive interview on Euronews from 9:30 onwards tonight.
Another night of disturbances on the sidelines of a rally against the French government's plan to reform the pension system. A new law which includes a rise in the retirement age to 64 was adopted on Monday evening through Article 49 of the Constitution without a vote of MPs and after 2 rejected motions of no confidence in the government. French President Emmanuel Macron has been keeping a low profile for the last few days, but has told allies he has no intention of dissolving Parliament, reshuffling the government or calling a referendum on pension reform to calm tensions. He will also stand by his beleaguered Prime Minister. Macron is due to resurface today, according to the Élysée Palace, to give a live televised interview about the social and political tensions over the pension reform. But anger over the government's decision to invoke a notorious constitutional power to force the reform through the National Assembly without a vote last week has dismayed many ruling party MPs. A further day of protests and strikes is set for Thursday.
Victims of Brussels' deadliest terror attack were remembered on Wednesday morning, 7 years after 3 suicide bombers killed 32 people and injured hundreds more. A minute's silence was held at both the airport and metro station where the bombs were detonated in 2016, and a list of the victims' names were called out. This year, a 33rd name was added to the list, that of Shanti Decorte, who was euthanized last year as a result of her declining mental health after the attack. Belgium's Prime Minister Alexander De Croo and EU Parliament President Roberta Metsola were present at the ceremony. On the 22nd of December 2022, 10 men went on trial for the bombings. The case is expected to last until June and is predicted to cost €35.3 million, making it the most expensive trial in Belgian history.
Britain's former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has admitted that he misled Parliament by telling MPs that parties at his Downing Street office did not break COVID lockdown rules. But in written evidence to a parliamentary committee, he insisted that he acted in good faith. Johnson was fined by police for breaking the COVID rules that his own government set. In his statement, the former Prime Minister said, "I did not intentionally or recklessly mislead the House on the 1st of December 2021, the 8th of December or on any other date. I would never have dreamed of doing so." Johnson will appear in person before the committee on Wednesday. If it finds that he deliberately lied to the House of Commons, he could be suspended and ultimately face a by-election in his constituency, in which he holds a slim majority of just over 7,000. Johnson was forced out as Prime Minister after the latest in a series of scandals last July.
The rail services are gradually resuming in Greece. For the first time in 3 weeks, trains are running again in a country still mourning by the tragic collision that killed 57 people. For commuters, life goes on despite the accident.
Δεν αισθάνομαι φόβο. Είμαι προετοιμασμένη που δεν λυπήθηκα πολύ αυτό που έγινε. Έχω κλάψει πάρα πολύ, αλλά τώρα πρέπει να δουλέψουμε.
I've been in Athens 4 nights, 5 nights, and I'm happy to hear that they're restarted, that's for sure, because buses are expensive.
The head-on train crash that occurred on February 28 near Clarissa exposed the disastrous pitfalls of the railway system in Greece. The area where the tragedy occurred lacked safety systems that could have prevented the incident. Protests against the government have taken place across the country. Public pressure has shaken Greece's centre-right government and pushed them to bring forward the date of the country's general elections. Full resumption of freight and passenger trains will restart by April 11th.
Uganda has passed an anti-homosexuality law that could punish those who engage in same-sex relationships or even identify as LGBTQ+ to life imprisonment or the death penalty. In a turbulent session, Parliament passed the bill on Tuesday and defended that it will help stop child abuse.
This bill, Right Honourable Speaker, recognises that same-sex attraction is not innate and immutable characteristic. It was also intended to protect our cherished culture, the legal, religious and traditional family values of Ugandans, and acts that are likely to promote sexual promiscuity in this country.
Rights activists and the international community have condemned the bill, saying it will only provoke more attacks on the LGBTQ+ community, who are already facing economic blackmail and threats. The bill will now go on to President Museveni, who can choose to use his veto and maintain good relations with Western investors or sign it into law.
The gargoyles and other strange and grimacing creatures of Paris's Notre Dame Cathedral are being brought back to life. Originally they were supposed to protect the cathedral from the wrath of heaven, but many of them did not survive the fire in 2019. Working from photos, the craftsmen and women aim to create identical copies of the Gothic originals. The Notre Dame Cathedral is expected to reopen to the public in December 2024. It is a daily struggle for residents of Venezuela's capital, Caracas. Dozens of people wait to fill jugs of water from the stream flowing from the Guairara Repano Hill, where they tap water from broken pipes.
Venimos a buscar agua aquí cada 2 semanas para tomar. Y para la casa casi cada diario tengo que llevar porque nos llega a veces una vez a la semana y por 2 horas.
The UN reports that 2 billion people worldwide, or a quarter of the global population, don't have access to safe drinking water. Something the United Nations wants to draw attention to as it marks World Water Day.
10% of the global population currently lives in areas that are high or critical water stress. In our report, we said that up to 3.5 billion people live under conditions of water stress at least 1 month a year.
In developing countries, many problems related to drinking water are linked to rapid population growth and a lack of sanitary controls. And that puts people's health at risk.
C'est pas facile. Nos enfants, d'autres même souvent, ils ont des infections même au niveau même du ventre. Même j'ai une sœur même enceinte même qui est à la maison là. Tout dernièrement, actuellement elle est enceinte. Elle a eu une infection chronique.
Additionally, 1.4 million people die each year from diseases caused by water shortages or poor sanitation and hygiene.